to Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right, greetings everybody to this week's episode of Breaking History. I will soon be joined by my friend and collaborator, Gordon, aka Ghost of Based Patrick Henry, very shortly. But before we jump into anything, I would like to just start with a word from today's sponsor, or maybe two. We'll do two sponsors today, that's right. And then we'll hear a third sponsor at the very end. So let us jump right into, is it MyPillow? Could it be MyPillow? It is MyPillow. Here we go.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our biggest Made in America sale ever. We just put huge discounts on products made right here in the USA. MyPillow bed pillows, body pillows, go anywhere pillows, bolster pillows, all made with my patented adjustable fill. Mattresses, mattress toppers, mattress pads, adjustable bed frames, mattress foundations, and so much more. All made right here in the USA. And now we're expanding our USA products beyond just quality sleep. Like the cross I wear every day, now available in both men's and women's. We even have USA-made socks. And are you tired of being tired? Try our new health beverage, Rev 7. Or how about my coffee, the greatest coffee ever. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to get deep discounts on all these products. Plus, for a limited time, your order ships absolutely free.
All right. Thank you, Mike Lindell. All right, now let's just jump into one more ad from River BTC. So here we go. Okay. Stack sats with River. I don't know if there's a typo there. There might be a typo, or maybe I'm missing something in the lingo. It says stack sats with River. The Bitcoin-only platform built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Why River? Zero fee recurring buys stack Bitcoin effortlessly, hourly, daily, weekly, or monthly. 3.5% Bitcoin interest on cash. FDIC insured, no minimums, withdraw anytime. Expert US-based support, human help, plus private client services for big buys of $100,000 or more. Business accounts boost your balance sheet with Bitcoin and earn 3.5% paid in Bitcoin. Top-tiered wallet, send, receive, and manage Bitcoin securely. Unmatched security, full reserve custody, multi-sig cold storage, and proof of reserves. Join the Bitcoin revolution at badlandsmedia.tv/river and earn real returns. That's badlandsmedia.tv/river. There we go. Okay. So again, I think I've got to get a little bit more up on the lingo, because I feel like that wasn't necessarily a typo that was confusing me, but maybe it was. Either way, I'll figure this out. I'm going to iron this out and become more adept at this language. So until Gordon arrives, I figured what I would just do is maybe just do a little commentary on a few things I've been taking note of. My wife, Cynthia, as many of you here watching already are aware, she's an incredible researcher, and she just recently put out a piece on her Substack, which I'm going to put in the comment section very quickly, just going through some of the anomalies that people have to hold in mind. I mean, the idea of false flags is not new to anybody watching this program, but when you scratch, whether it's on the surface of the recent Brown University shooting, or the Bondi Beach shooting, or in the case earlier of the American guardsmen who were killed in Washington by what's his name, Ramanullah Lakinwal. There's always, you'll find, or more, in almost every one of these cases, instances or signals of hidden hands of intelligence agencies that are manipulating the show from behind the scenes in order to get certain effects. And it's those effects that are always the objective. Just like the case of 9/11 really wasn't about stopping terrorism. It was about getting an effect which involved turning the minds and the hearts of the people towards supporting something that American people would formerly have said absolutely no to, which was devastating, forever wasting wars into the Middle East, overthrowing governments across the board, turning nations of the Middle East from viable countries into dark age zones of mass death, and ultimately recruitment zones where there was despair and only with no sense of hope or future, a incubator for more radicalization of young people who could then be used as proxies for overturning more governments, as we saw in the case of the Arab Spring in Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Syria. Hey, and there's Gordon. How you doing, man?
Hey, Matt. Doing well.
Hey,
how are you?
Good. I was just starting a little rant.
Yeah. I've actually been sitting backstage for like a minute or two. I've just been listening. So,
oh, sweet.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Good rant.
Join my rant here. I'm gonna just continue on the rant a little bit, and I'm sure you'll see where you could just jump right into it. I'm noticing that you're doing the show from one of your daughter's bedrooms. That's
my son's bedroom. It's a crazy week. It's just one of those weeks, like the last week of school. I've been at my kids' preschool this morning. They did like chapel and
nice.
So it's apologies for being a few minutes late.
Oh, it was good, man. Don't worry about it. So I was just basically going through how intelligence agencies are always going to be found to be behind a lot of these things, these mass casualty events that usually create an effective psychological terror, confusion in the minds of the population, which makes them more pliable, makes individualism dissipate in favor of people going into some form of hive mind, tribalism, and social engineers have known for millennia. It's always easier to control a hive mind, a mob, a herd, rather than individuals who are using their own powers of sovereign mentation. So the way to break people out of that sovereignty, terror helps, confusion helps, things like that. Fear is a great one. And then all of a sudden people will do things when they're part of a mob that they would never individually do on their own, as we've seen again, case by case across the board. And that's how things like the French Revolution was turned into a bloodbath, a bloody terror, by people, again, being induced to fall into that mob ethos where they all of a sudden started cutting off heads of everybody. 40,000 people were getting tortured, tried in inquisitorial courts, secret courts during the Civil War that began in a bright and potentially beautiful way in France in 1789 with the Declaration of the Rights of Man. And it was a beautiful idea inspired by the best of the American experience, run by people who were largely making the American Revolution possible, around Marquis de Lafayette and all of the great French leaders who jumped in and saved the day for the United States in 1777. They, however, very quickly ended up getting their heads cut off left and right. And the majority of people who ended up also getting guillotined were civilians, poor people who were just being, seen as maybe a nuisance, as promoting the idea that we should think for ourselves, not fall into this left versus right dualism, which was how the occult secret societies that were pervasive throughout the Masonic orders throughout France were trying to organize the idea of picking either an all left or all right, and that's largely where today's language of left versus right politics comes out of the French Revolution. Which was that the left, so-called, were people seated during the French Civil War on the left side of the French Parliament, and the right was on the right side, literally. And the way they defined that was that, well, if you're a Jacobin, you're on the left. If you're a Jacobin, it means you think with your heart. You don't use reason. Reason is tyrannical. And that's, that appealed to the uncultured and uncultivated poor people who had been so abused by the system of empire. If you're on the right, it means you think with logic. You don't get contaminated with your emotions. You're the Girondins. The Girondins are going to impose the freedom of logic onto the tyranny and anarchy of emotions. And that's how the system was organized. And they took turns lopping each other's heads off until nobody was left with a head, except for this vacuum that would be filled by this Rothschild-funded Napoleon proto-fascist who promised to be like a George Washington, a Roman consul, bringing order and liberty to the people. But, very quickly, it didn't take him long to declare himself world emperor, which is where Napoleon made the shift in 1804, I think. And then he said, or 1800. And then he said, okay, now I'm going to be the world emperor. And I'm going to create a new church with me at the head. I'm going to create an expansionist global new Roman Empire, not the Republic, the Empire. So we see how this sort of thing has been manifesting throughout the ages in every revolution that goes sour, every mass casualty event, including, Ramanula Lachenwall. And I was just talking about how Cynthia's new essay or short essay goes through Lachenwall's the shooter in Washington, how he was actually tied to what's it called? The zero units, the Green Beret run zero units in Afghanistan. Those are the mass murder programs where people in the zero units would do the night raids. We heard stories where whole villages of women and children would get massacred through these core night raids overseen by the CIA and Green Beret throughout Afghanistan. That's what Lockenwell was a 10-year full member on before he was brought into the United States. So when we're told, hey, no, these are Iranian proxies, shooting up beaches and shooting up U.S., civilians. And hey, by the way, we got to get Mossad to come in and help us figure out how to stop Iranian-run proxies. We should always keep that spidey sense very, very strongly beeping. That was my little mini rant. I don't know if you looked into any of the other elements of like the Israeli Mossad push to try to like use the little events in in Australia or Brown University to try to get more influence in the U.S. or Commonwealth intelligence agencies, as if they didn't have enough already. But is that?
Yeah, I mean, and that's actually something that I've been pretty zeroed in on. I mean, over 2 years ago, this would have been September or October. I mean, right around the time I started at Badlands. I think one of the first things I brought to Brian's attention, CanCon on Badlands Daily, was the fact that in Virginia, Glenn Youngkin, he was the first governor of 38 governors to sign into either law, or I think some of them did it by executive order, introducing what is it, the IRHA, the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which is this very nebulous kind of NGO that established a new definition for anti-Semitism, which includes a number of things, but that primarily revolve around criticism of the Israeli government. But also, I think some people recall like it going viral online, the claiming that the Jews killed Jesus, which is in the Bible, stuff like that. Like that's all considered anti-Semitism.
Wait, whoa. Claiming that the Jews killed Jesus?
Oh yeah,
is anti-Semitic?
Oh yes. Let me pull up the official IHRA definition.
No, I can't.
Yeah, and then I'll also show you a video of Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of the ADL, who says that they're not just going to hunt normal anti-Semite, like normal anti-Semites, white nationalists or whatever. They're also going to be hunting down Jews who criticize the Israeli government as well. They are also anti-Semites. Anyone who's an anti-Zionist is also an anti-Semite, including Jews.
Oh, they did it. They made the full shift. It was almost kind of a bit of a difficult gray zone to try to like merge the two, but they did the full switcheroo now, eh?
I'm so glad they did too, because now we can stop talking about like quote unquote Jew hatred, and we can just talk about what this is. This is just raw political power projection.
Yeah.
And the ability for a political entity, otherwise known as a government, to impose itself on people and demand compliance and demand capitulation, which is exactly what we're seeing right now.
Yes.
Let me pull up this website.
Okay. I believe you. I just
I think it's important for people to see this.
All right. Sure. Okay.
So 38 states, as far as I know, it's 38. It could be higher by now, but it was 38 as of like a year and a half ago. Almost all of them Republican, as you can imagine, have somehow included this definition, and it's a working definition of anti-Semitism, which means, and all of the legislation in every single state points to this definition, the IHRA's, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition, meaning if they change the definition tomorrow, the law changes with the definition, if that makes sense. So if they decide tomorrow that people with red hair are anti-Semitic, then guess what? You're not committing a hate crime if you have red hair. This is like as Orwellian as it gets. So here's the working definition, which I'm sure they probably have changed since I looked at this like a year or 2 years ago. Let me see if so drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. So calling what the IDF is doing, if you're like, man, this is like reminds me of the Nazis. using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism, e.g., claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel to characterize Israel or Israelis. So, like, again, talking about Jews killing Jesus. Now they've altered that language a little bit because I think originally it was just claims of Jews killing Jesus, blood libel. Stuff like they are basically saying ignore reality. Because I remember when this came out, like even like Matt Gaetz and a number of other like public figures, I think Tucker Carlson, maybe a few others, were all talking about, well, this is going to make the Bible illegal. Like if this is true, then we're going to this is going to make the Bible illegal. And there was a lot of concern that that's the direction it was going in. It still could be heading in that direction, by the way. So you have that, and then you have let's look at Greenblatt.
Well, just quick. Okay, yeah. You do the Greenblatt thing, and I'll show you something else.
If you have something to pull up, you go and pull it up, and I'll
okay, yeah. I mean, I just want to show basically something that surprised me. This is already a couple of years ago, but there's this agency that gets a lot of Canadian government funding called antihate.ca, and it's one of these Soros Canadian government, and they were discovered to get a ton of cash, taxpayer money, and so they produced a hit piece on my website a couple of years ago. And I'm just going to show this thing here, and it's called, like, people can go check this thing out, and it's called Canadian Global Politics Journal, home to multiple anti-Semitic articles masquerading as academia. And that's a little screenshot from my website, Canadian Patriot Review, and an article that I had published on it a little while ago by Doug Miller. He's a friend of mine, great article, great author. And it was called On the British Imperial Roots of Political Zionism, with, little Herschel and Theodore Herschel and Lord Palmerston there in the background. And basically they go through this thing saying that the Canadian Patriot Review is an eclectic publication that mostly takes aim at what it calls the rule of monetarism, post-industrialism, and war, which have become signature features of the Anglo-American system dominant since World War II. They're just quoting from my thing. And then they say in a December 2019 article titled Debunking the Myth of the Jewish Conspiracy, which is something I wrote, Ehret, who co-founded this journal and helps edit the publication, ironically tries to discredit the idea that Jews run the world conspiracy theory by repeating a number of ideas that very much align with the popular anti-Semitic narratives, basically because I call out George Soros, the Rothschilds. That makes me all of a sudden an anti-Semite. And then they labeled 2 articles on the British Imperial Roots of Political Zionism by Doug Miller from December 2020 that I published, and another article where he's basically just going through the B'nai B'rith's Scottish Masonic roots, which is true that the same agency from the Scottish Rite in the U.S. that also co-founded the KKK also sprung out the B'nai B'rith that has these Freemasonic degrees of initiation and symbolisms. That's provably true. They're saying that makes it an anti-Semitic thing. And then the other article, or the other author that I publish, is Anton Chaikin, that they also label in here somewhere as being like an anti-Jewish or an anti-Semitic author. Now, the thing here is that Anton Chaikin and Doug Miller are both practicing Jews. They're both Jewish authors writing about how this Masonic thing has taken control, created Zionism, and has tried to manipulate Jews to become geopolitical chess pieces. And then my piece, I'm clearly trying to very clearly get across that, well, I literally call it, why, like the name of the actual article that I wrote is Debunking the Myth of the Jewish Conspiracy. So that's the sort of thing that they're putting their evidence on.
And they're calling you a hater.
And a hater, because I'm trying to defend the Jews who are getting a lot of hate from, anyway, it's mind-boggling. But the fact that they're putting this on and they're attacking 2 Jewish authors for being anti-Semites directly is just mind-blowing. But what you're saying, though, makes a lot of sense. But
actually what you're doing is extremely dangerous for them, because the nuance, when you introduce the nuance is dangerous for them, because they like to paint with a broad brush, and they like to oversimplify things, because oversimplifying things makes it easier to manipulate public opinion, because people are too busy and distracted in their day-to-day life to understand the nuance. So they see a brown person from the Middle East and they're like, that's a Muslim. And they're like, all right, well, like they think terrorist, they're like Muslim. They, it's like they think Muslim, they think terrorist. Like, these are the kind of word association games that they have played over the years to gaslight people into accepting really, really silly ideas that have a lot of logical fallacies once you start to scrape away at the surface, which I've been doing for years now and have come to understand, I think, what they're doing. I mean, for example, I took my daughter to a Jewish community center a few weeks ago for a birthday party, and was talking to the parents and everything. And it's like all very nice people, some of them I knew, some of them I didn't know. But it's like, do I look at that group of people, like that community, and be like, oh, they're in on this? Like, no. It's like, this is about raw political power and the political entity, Israel, which is run by Jews. I mean, they're like, you can't really separate those two things. They hide behind just the normal Jewish people walking around and say, well, what, you hate these people? Like, pointing to the normal ones, like, and say, you hate these people. But the reality is that it's a group that is not just Jewish, but they also identify as Protestant. They also identify as atheist. They also identify as Muslim. And all of them are serving the same ends, and that's to worship Satan. So here's Jonathan Greenblatt to that point, doing an interview after the shooting this past weekend, and listen to what he says.
We have people on the far left justifying like a biblical catastrophe or cataclysm like October the 7th, literally justifying it, literally describing some of the perpetrators who were caught and captured as hostages, which is so profane, I hesitate to even say it out loud. It's just so disgraceful and amoral. But the reality is there are segments of the far left which have been consumed by this anti-Zionist ideology. And we've talked on your show before, and I'm pretty out there saying anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, because it is. I also think the sky is blue. I also think that the world is not flat. I mean, anti-Zionism is simply the latest way that anti-Jewish hate is normalized and legitimized with a pseudo-scientific or pseudo-political veneer. But if you look at the tropes, and if you listen to the words and you see them for who they are, like the rabid anti-Zionist is just an anti-Semite by any other name. By the way, even if they come from our Jewish community, we need to recognize that as well.
Even if they come from our Jewish community, we need to recognize that as well. And so let me show you this, because this is where it gets like, this is where I think everyone needs to really focus and be smart here, because we're at a very critical moment, I think, in this story where things are shifting really quickly. And if we are not vigilant in this moment, this is how the tyranny, I think, gets imposed on us. And it's all going to be done with emotion, and it's all going to be done like that. So here, let me show you. So the largest, like I was talking about this yesterday on my show and on Badlands Daily, but the largest media outlet in Israel, the largest online media outlet in Israel, called Israel Hayom, they put out an article, and here's what's really interesting. Sorry if I can pull this thing up.
Sure.
They originally published this article on December 1st. They then republish it the day after the shooting, or the day of the shooting. They republish it the day of. And here I can prove that to you, because so here's my post that I put out on December 13th. This is which I guess was that Friday night.
I'm losing track of days. Maybe
Saturday night. So that's Saturday night. And when I click on it, you can see I took a screenshot of it. You can clearly see published on December 1st, last modified December 1st, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I go and I click on the actual link that I hyperlinked in there, and I come over here, it says published on December 14th, last modified December 4th. So they republished it the day after.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, oh, we published this 2 weeks ago, but we're going to republish this now as new content. to remind everybody. But I think the fact that they published this 2 weeks before the shooting, like, speaks to what you were just saying about, like, they were gaslighting something. It was almost like predictive programming, right? Because when you come back and you look at it, it says there's only one way to protect Jews against anti-Semitism. That is why it says Jewish communities often find themselves on the front lines alone without a coordinated Jewish defense system and without any rapid professional response. A new approach is needed, one that creates a permanent global structure capable of providing a safety net and an immediate response in an emergency. That is why a new move is required, establishing a Jewish People's Guard, not a local organization, not a security company, and not a temporary initiative, but a permanent global structure that creates an international Jewish safety net. Such a system would connect communities around the world with the state of Israel and official security bodies. That's like Mossad, IDF intelligence. It would enable rapid emergency responses, provide orderly training for community response teams, and identify incitement processes before they turn violent. That is pre-crime. A Jewish People's Guard would create a global alert mechanism, provide unified protocols, and build an efficient defense capability working in full coordination with governments, local law enforcement agencies, and key allies, especially in the United States.
Yeah. Well, and you see that across the board, right? Like, that's not going to go sour. Like, how what a scary abuse of liberty that would usher into this world if this type of reform were allowed. Because this is not just in the United States, as we see it. This same thing is being pushed inside of the legal structures inside of all Commonwealth countries, in the UK, in Australia, which is, again, being assisted by these mass casualty events that are making people even more stupid than they already were prior to the shooting at Bondi Beach, by figures who seem to have clear high-level training in what they were doing as far as carrying out their mass shooting event. I don't know about the direct connections to military intelligence, but probably maybe people have dug into that. I don't know. But in the case of Ramanullah Lockenwall, definitely there's high-level cases of special forces training and coordination during this person's time in Afghanistan. In the case of Canada, we've got a whole series of reforms being sped through right now, not being covered by the mainstream media in any serious way. That essentially, there's so many bills, omnibus bills, that are called things like the Online Harms Act being pushed through heavily right now, the Digital Charter Act, the Beneficial Ownership Transparency Act, that are basically calling for the intervention on pre-crime, like the legalization of words that might imply or might fall under certain definitions that could be characterized as inciting hate. We've heard this being discussed. There's been efforts to pass this, but in the past they've been blocked by various parliamentary officials. Now it's being pushed through heavily. So I don't know to what degree it's bringing in official Israeli intelligence agencies into an active role here in Canada, but I wouldn't be surprised if that is also happening. I have to look a little bit more into it. These are big behemoth bills. But yeah, this is being coordinated across the transatlantic world right now.
By the way, to your point, Australia has already announced that Mossad is boots on the ground, coordinating with Australia, because they're trying to help them unravel this thing and figure out what actually is going on here. And so the goal here is basically to get some Israeli intelligence official in the room with your local sheriff, your local sheriff's office, give them a list of people that are a problem. And then the sheriff basically is going to make your life unpleasant. We also there's a video. We don't need to watch every video that I have, but there's a video of a woman speaking at the Israeli embassy in the US. This is in Washington, D.C. a few days ago, promising that they're going to hunt down people who criticize Israel online, and make sure they can't get jobs, make sure they can't live lives, make sure they can't get loans from the bank. They're going to basically use the private sector. They're going to mobilize the private sector, kind of like they did to Kanye West. We saw that absolutely happen to Kanye West. But don't accuse this group of people of controlling the world. But if you do, they will absolutely just make your life a living hell. It's a little bit of there's a little bit of irony in what they're doing. But here is Laura Loomer. Here's Laura Loomer saying, let me read her post. She says, Meir Kahane was right about everything. Then he was shot and killed by a Muslim in New York City for being right. We need to bring back the JDL, the Jewish Defense League, which is something that Meir Kahane created, an armed Jewish militia. She says, armed Jews who don't screw around should be patrolling the streets of America. Bring back the Jewish Defense League in every city. It's time to say F you, never again. And she goes on to post about this over and over and over and over again. Meir Kahane was right. Let me just
oh my God.
I've talked about Meir Kahane so many times to this audience that I think people get sick of it. But I need to remind everyone who Meir Kahane is. Meir Kahane was a literal Jewish terrorist who was arrested by the Shin Bet in Israel. He's an American-born, but moved to Israel. Served in the Knesset after going to prison for 6 months because he plotted to fly a plane full of explosives in the early 1980s into the Dome of the Rock. He was arrested by the Shin Bet for plotting that, thrown in prison for 6 months. That's it, just 6 months. Gets out of prison, runs for office in the Knesset in one of these Israeli settlements, wins, and then basically for 4 years, from 84 to 1988, he's serving in the Knesset under the Kach party, this K-A-C-H party. And every time he gets up and speaks, like the Likud, like all the right-wing parties get up and leave the room. Because they're like, even they think this guy is crazy. And basically his messaging was Christians are the ancestral enemies of Jews. Christians should be expelled from Israel. All churches should be burned. Christians should face violence. Here's his this is his chief lieutenant, Benzi Gopstein, saying Christmas has no place in the Holy Land. This is from an interview he did with Slate magazine in December 20. This was published on Christmas Eve 2015 by Slate magazine, where he goes on to say, he says, Gopstein, a religious extremist, also known as Benzi, calls the Christian church Jews' deadly enemy for hundreds of years. He laments that the disgust for Christianity has disappeared with the good life of the democratic age. He has publicly insisted on setting fire to Christian churches. So because of all this, he gets arrested for incitement by the Israeli government. And then when he goes to court in 2020 for that case, his defense attorney is Itamar Ben-Gvir, this guy who is now the national security minister under Bibi Netanyahu.
Of course.
So these guys like Itamar Ben-Gvir, the guys inside of this blue rectangle right here, are all Kahanists. They're all followers of Kahane. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, Israel Katz. Gideon Sa'ar may or may not be. I mean, he's certainly pretty radical, but he's probably more of a centrist than the others. So I'll kick it back to you to plug my computer in before it dies. But yeah, it's the goal here, according to Laura Loomer, is to get armed Jewish militias patrolling the streets, and the rhetoric coming out from all of the entire diaspora, not just the Israeli government, but all of its surrogates, is that anyone who criticizes the Israel, the government of Israel, is an enemy who should be dealt with. I mean, can you not see where this is going? This is going like Antifa. This is inverse Antifa. This is right-wing Antifa who's going to come to your house with weapons and scare the shit out of you if you are a problem for them, a political problem. Not necessarily a Jew hater, but creating problems for them politically. Yeah.
No, that's clearly what's in play right now. And I'm when Gordon gets back on, I'm going to ask a question about his take on just some of the optics that we saw in the recent. Oh, there you are. Hey, did you get the computer plugged in yet, or are you?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Plugged in. Yep.
So let me ask you this one quickly. Obviously, everybody is abuzz right now about some of the optics that had occurred. Was it last night or the night before? Last night, yeah, during the speech where you had that Trump gave a certain address. He was labeled by Mark Levin, who had a very, very antagonistic, I'd say a very, very, it seemed a little insulting the way he just tried to put his dominant alpha sort of image on, and almost push Trump down and call him, they celebrate his being America's first non-consecutive Jewish president. Trump seems to have taken it in a surprisingly passive angle, going along with all of the messaging. He had even in that same speech brought on Marian Adelson, you know, to be celebrated in front of the audience, in front of the American people.
Yes.
And I'm curious to get your take, because I know you always look at this sort of stuff and interpret it a little bit differently.
Yep.
I found it all kind of sickening, frankly. Yes. How are you receiving and interpreting what just happened there?
Well, let me. I've had so many people like tag me and send that to me, send those clips to me. And I did write about it this morning in the news brief, so you can go read it there as well. Before I give you my response to that, because that is such an important question and something that needs to be addressed. I want to play this quick clip of Bibi Netanyahu holding a press conference after, like, in the wake of the Australia shooting, and listen to what he says.
On August 17th, about 4 months ago, I sent Prime Minister Albanese of Australia a letter in which I gave him warning that the Australian government's policy was promoting and encouraging anti-Semitism in Australia. I wrote, "Your call for a Palestinian state pours fuel on the anti-Semitic fire. It rewards Hamas terrorism. It emboldens those who menace Australian Jews and encourages the Jew hatred now stalking your streets. Anti-Semitism is a cancer. It spreads when leaders stay silent. It retreats when leaders act. I call upon you to replace weakness with action, appeasement with resolve. Instead, Prime Minister, you replaced weakness with weakness and appeasement with more appeasement. Your government did nothing to stop the spread of anti-Semitism in Australia. You did nothing to curb the cancer cells that were growing inside your country. You took no action. You let the disease spread. And the result is the horrific attacks on Jews we saw today. We saw an action of a brave man, turns out a Muslim brave man, and I salute him, that stopped one of these terrorists from killing innocent Jews. But it requires the action of your government, which you're not taking. And you have to, because history will not forgive hesitation and weakness. It will honor action and strength. That's what Israel expects of each of your governments in the West and elsewhere, because the disease spreads and it will consume you as well. But we are worrying right now about our people, our safety, and we do not remain silent.
So we are worried about our people and our safety, and Bibi Netanyahu for many years now has made it clear that he doesn't just consider Israeli citizens his people. He considers non-Israeli Jews his people as well. 55% of Jews worldwide are not Israeli citizens. At any moment, they can pick up the phone and call the Israeli government and ask for citizenship, and they will get it if they can demonstrate that they are Jewish. They will get it like that. But basically, he's saying anywhere that there is a Jew, they are our people, and we're going to protect them. That gives them jurisdiction in their mind to go in and protect. And the expectation, we expect all governments to comply with us when we impose this whatever this apparatus is going to look like. We expect all governments to capitulate and accept our help, because our goal is to protect our people. This is not a geographic country anymore. This is now a country that exists everywhere at all times, wherever there is a quote unquote Jewish person.
That's so ironic, right? Because they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. Because the whole idea of Torah Jews and Judaism more generally was that these are people who, you know, they didn't have a physical geographic nation per se because of certain issues that cropped up in the Old Testament. And, you know, the idea of the British Empire and a lot of Jesuit grand strategists throughout the entirety of the last several centuries was really trying to figure out how could they retweak and reinterpret the Old Testament in order to justify the concept that a physical blood and soil cult has to be the foundation upon which a new rebranded Jewish identity can be formulated, which would be also tied directly to some eschatological end times cataclysmic scenario that's also baked into the book of Revelations and other things, maybe the book of Daniel. So there's a lot of effort to do some religious engineering around getting this idea of a physical location to become the foundation upon which an entire identity could be reconstructed, which they were able to do around the Zionist movement. Now, the anti-Zionist Jews are completely against it, based upon that very same principle that you're not allowed to have a physical nation per se until certain things occur. Now, ironically, Netanyahu and the Likud and all of these hardcore Zionist types were of the view that no, we need a physical, literal location. We can't be spread out around the world. That can't be our identity. We need a physical thing. And now they both want that, but they also want to use the argument that anywhere we're located is the nation of Israel. Any physical region giving us jurisdiction, like you just said, to be anywhere at all times, everywhere, while at the same time being in a specific location. So it's like you got to pick one. You can't have both.
Yeah, but and the Jewish thinker responsible for changing that idea was Moses Hess in the early 1800s. He's known as the communist rabbi. He's the founder of communism. His students were Karl Marx and Joseph Engels, and they were the ones who went on and wrote the Communist Manifesto. But only after Moses Hess, in the 11 years before they published that book, published 7 books about communism, including one called Communism and Socialism. So he came up with communism. However, he was very devout. He was very pious. He didn't believe in violence, but he did believe in the creation of a Jewish state. And he basically called for Jews to leave Europe and self-immigrate to Palestine and create the state of Israel. And that's where he had his break with his students, because Karl Marx said, I don't want to create Zion in Israel. I want to create Zion everywhere. We want to have a revolution everywhere, because, of course, Karl Marx wasn't devout. He was an atheist. So he basically said, we want to have this revolution everywhere. We don't want to have this revolution just in Israel. And so, but of course, Moses Hess was backed by the Rothschilds, and he had connections to them. So this all goes back to that, of course, and that's called Reform Judaism. Reform Zionism.
Okay, Reform Zionism. Okay, I was gonna say,
Reform Zionism. So last thing before we get to Trump is
wait. Before we do that, just to say quickly, Bravest just said the Jews invented communism. Actually, I would advise people to check out Richard Poe's recent book, How the British Invented Communism and Blamed It on the Jews. I've interviewed Richard Poe, who's an amazing researcher, several times, and his book is impeccable in terms of going at the higher religious engineering in the high priesthoods that have been utilizing Gnostic Christianity, Gnostic Judaism, all of these different Gnostic sects to plant seeds of social geopolitical controls. And his book is fantastic. So I'll just say it quickly. How the British Invented Communism and Blamed It on the Jews. Highly Google that now, people. Pick it up. It's like $20 on Amazon. Very much worth it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Bravis isn't entirely wrong, though, because Moses Hess did draw inspiration from ancient Jewish communities, but the way those Jewish communities worked, which were all collectivist communities, was that it was like max 140 people, basically living in like a collectivist mindset where nobody owned anything private. But that wasn't, as I understand it, common practice among the Jewish communities of the ancient world. These were just certain communities did it this way. And that was where Moses Hess claims. So that might be where Bravis is referring to, is that Moses Hess claimed to be inspired by ancient Jewish practices in these certain communities.
Well, what I'll say to that is that if you look at the early anti-Christian Gnostics who acted like they were Christian, but they weren't really, the followers of the book of like the Sethian Gospels that were like really big, the followers of Valentinius and Marcion and Balsilides, these early, satanic, nominal, wannabe prophets trying to co-opt and take control of Christianity. They also organized their little Gnostic communes in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th century in these very, very collectivist little groupings, kind of like the what was that messianic sect? Forgetting it all of a sudden. shoot. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But so you had these like all of these cults were always organized in these small population controlled communes where everything was equal. There was no private property, no marriage, you know, every sex was free. And that was part of the organizing principle. You had this also in the Sufi cults too, early Sufi cults in the Middle East as well, very much organized in these little communes. And it's just, I think, a good way of just control. It's like little laboratories that are generated out of which you can fuck with people a lot more and generate certain psychological profiles that are testing grounds for how do you incubate and generate different aspects of the human psyche that you could then apply on a larger macro scale in a similar way that we saw out of like, you know, if you look at it, the MK Ultra operations that were begun with people in small groups, small individual groups out of World War I who had shock therapy, and then they were screwed with by psychiatrists from Tavistock, brought into the United States to just see how do you compartmentalize individuals, how do you break down their personas, make them more pliable, and then they brought in groups. So they're like, okay, now that we've worked on this for a few years on individuals, now let's apply it to groups and see what we could take from these small cases into like groups of 5 to 10, and then we'll take it into groups of 20 to 30, and then we'll see how we can like steer the group in a certain, this is called group dynamics under Kurt Lewin and the Bertrand Russell crowd, that we're then seeing, okay, now let's see if we can take it to a whole nation state. And that's exactly like, there's this woman, Naomi Klein, who wrote a book called The Shock Doctrine, and she's overall an idiot, but there were 30 writers on the book. But it goes through how the MK Ultra program and the experiments were then done to do shock therapy on whole nations of Chile, of African nations, to see how do you break down a whole society through trauma and then reconstruct that society like as if people were blank slates to be reprogrammed after trauma, after a phoenixing operation that would dissolve and then recombine under social engineers, which is what they did also in the shock and awe in Afghanistan. You know, just bomb them to the Stone Age, and then maybe you can create a new type of society. But this goes back to ancient times, and it manifested in different ways in the Jewish cults, the Christian cults. And if you look at it, there were always the healthy Christians and Jews battling this thing out. Like you had Rabbi Philo of Alexandria working with the Apostle Peter together. They were collaborating in Rome, battling both aspects of the Gnostic Jewish cults. You know, the followers of Simon the Magician, who was sort of like the godhead of all of the Gnostics. And it was Peter who was like exposing the fraud of Simon the Magician with Philo of Alexandria, the rabbi, you know, and they were doing this work together. So you always had the better Christians and Jews working together to expose these satanic elements infiltrating both of their societies, you know, to mess with everybody. I'm just little 2 cents thrown in there.
Yeah. And I think you also see a pattern in the 20th century of Jewish intellectuals with sympathies towards communism. And I think a lot of that is driven by the fact that many of them came out of Eastern Europe, where like the Pale of Settlement, where they were so poor. I mean, the stories go that they were so poor. For 125 years, they lived in this giant ghetto, which is modern day Ukraine. And they were so poor that when the Prussians and the Russians and the Austrians would fight wars in that area, and then the soldiers would go through to take the spoils after winning a battle. They'd go into the towns and loot them. There was nothing to take, and the soldiers would get angry because they barely even had furniture. So a lot of these people, and this would include the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks came out of this ghetto. I think we're sympathetic to the idea of collectivism because of the psychology of the ghetto they came out of, and they were and just being absolutely destitute. And so then the emotional arguments about collectivism, I think, start to appeal. And you see those same tactics being applied in America and Europe today, where they go to the poorest demographics and they appeal to their sense of like the unfairness of capitalism, right? The unfairness of, as they understand it, free market capitalism, which they don't actually live in a free market system, but they don't understand that. So anyway, we digress, but yes, there's definitely a sordid and interesting history there. Now, I want to bring up this guy. He's this is Rabbi Yehuda Kaplan, I think is how you say his name. He's Trump's U.S. anti-Semitism czar. I don't think he's been confirmed yet by Congress, but he was appointed a long time ago. But most of Trump's appointments haven't been approved yet by the Senate. And so listen to what he says the other day. This is at a Jerusalem Post conference, I believe in DC.
The president is sending a very strong message.
This guy, by the way, is also born in Israel, so he's not even American born.
Just think about it. Ironically, I get off a plane. I am the president's representative, and I am walking off with a yarmulke, and I have kosher food, and embassies will have kosher food. It is a game changer. The appointment is a game changer, and it's not about history. It's about education. And how do we educate? Indonesia has 350 million Muslims living in the country. How do we change their textbooks? How do we hold the people in Gaza accountable that if America is paying for UN textbooks and supposedly the changes are made, why are those textbooks not being used, and why are they using their old textbooks? We have to teach people it's not okay to educate your kids to be a martyr. Okay? And we have to hold those countries accountable. How do we battle anti-Semitism on the internet? How are we doing better on algorithms? What companies can we work with? We are going to have a whole division within the office of the Special Envoy to combat anti-Semitism that is going to work on technology and working with the greatest leaders in technology, many of whom are Jewish and have offered their assistance. The office is going to be revamped entirely to be one of the highest profile offices in the State Department, because that's what the secretary wants and that's what the president wants. So we are going to have a very, very strong mandate on education, on protecting people, and how are we able to make a huge difference in combating what goes on.
So y'all probably thought that because you voted for Donald Trump that you were going to get rid of the speech, the hate speech stuff and the censorship. And I mean, this guy is openly calling for adjusting algorithms to censor speech. He's openly saying we should be writing the textbooks for foreign countries. Like, why are we, the United States, writing a textbook for the kids in like Indonesia? Like, why is that even our prerogative? Like, that shouldn't even be on our radar, but yet this is what he's talking about. So we have to be very, very like sober and clear-eyed when we talk about this, because we're in a very dangerous moment here where one wrong move and we do end up in the bottom of that pit of like the Orwellian hellscape. So with that said, let's now talk about what happened last night with Mark Levin. So here's the moment you're talking about. It's
that's it right there. Yeah,
condensed down to 30 seconds. Let me see if I think I started a few seconds in.
I said, this is our first Jewish president. Now he's the first Jewish president to serve two not consecutive presidencies. We thank you for everything.
That's right. Bad things happened on the second one. Namely, the election was rigged. And we found out, and you see that happening. But
And you are the greatest president.
thank you very much.
And God bless you. I miss you. I miss you. And I said,
Okay, so this is not what's cut out of that clip is that he says before that, 6 years ago, I called him the first Jewish president. Everyone's losing their mind over this clip. Mark Levin 6 years ago in 2019 said this during a similar kind of moment where he said, you're the first Jewish president. He was in the White House and Trump kind of like smiled and nodded and was like, oh, that's really nice of you to say. But that's like, this isn't the first time Mark Levin has done this. Now let's look, I want to show you something. Mark Levin, not only was Mark Levin viciously anti-Trump in 2016, he wrote an op-ed, I think for Fox News, that said, I will not vote for Trump, even if he wins the nomination. I will not vote for him. And here's why. And he wrote a whole article about why he thinks Trump is one of the worst people of all time. And he's terrible. And he's going to be a terrible Republican president and all this stuff. Okay. The only reason he's changed his tune on Trump is because Trump has been so pro-Israel that Mark Levin sees him as an asset now. Here is something that he reposted yesterday. Actually, I guess this would have been Monday, 2 days ago. You can literally just run through this guy's X history, and all he does is subvert Trump nonstop. It's every single time Trump does something, he comes out and says, Why are we talking to the Arabs? Why are we talking to Qatar? Why are we talking to Turkey? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? It looks like he may have actually deleted the post. Let me see. Yeah, he did. He deleted the post, I think. Wow. But you know what? That's all right because I saved the post. I screenshotted the post and let me see. Nope, here it is. So this is by Max Abrams, who's he's like a pro-Israel shill. And it says the tilt to Qatar is arguably the biggest foreign policy. This is reposted by Mark Levin. Is arguably the biggest foreign policy legacy of this administration. It's planting the seeds for a massive war, has saved Hamas, screwed up Gaza, is bad for Syria, and dampens the fight at home against the Muslim Brotherhood. And he's screenshotting a Times of Israel article that says Israel up in arms as U.S. Qatar renewed talks for sale of advanced F-35 jets. And this is what Mark Levin does. He is not pro-Trump. He sits there and he attacks Trump for being sympathetic to Putin. He attacks Trump for being sympathetic to MBS. He attacks Trump for being friends with Qatar, for being friends with Turkey, for trying to make peace in the Middle East. He attacks Trump every single time. Him and Laura Loomer were viciously attacking Trump the whole week back in May when he was in the Middle East visiting those 3 Gulf Arab states. So it's very important to understand that Mark Levin does not actually like Trump. He just views Trump, I think, as a useful tool to advance the interests of Israel. That's the only reason he said those nice things about Trump. And I think Trump knows all this. So I want to shift your attention now instead to this. There's 2 different posts, but this is from last night as well, and we're not going to watch the whole thing. It's like,
hey, just before you read this, I just got to read Cam Cooksey's little contribution to that little video that we just saw. It was pretty hilarious. This is like when the drunk, sweaty guy comes up to talk to you, and he's saying stuff that sounds nice, but he smells like shit, is slurring his words, and won't stop touching you.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm guessing Cam has had some firsthand experience, but I think we could all identify to varying degrees with that. Very astute.
Yep. So, well said. Well said, Cam. So I'm not going to play this whole thing, but in this moment in time where I just laid out all the cards where you have the entire Israeli apparatus from the prime minister down to the influencers all calling for this global structure, political structure, like security structure is what they call it, like that all governments need to capitulate to. Here is what Trump says in this moment. I think this is really interesting. This is not the first time he said this, by the way.
President of the United States, I will always support Jewish Americans, and I will always be a friend and a champion to the Jewish people. I have been. And I will say, if you go back 10, 12, 15 years ago at the most, the strongest lobby in Washington was the Jewish lobby. It was Israel. That's no longer true. You have to be very careful. You have a Congress in particular, which is becoming anti-Semitic. You have AOC +3. You have those people, Ilhan Omar, she hates Jewish people. And you have to be very careful because there's been a big change. If you go back 15 years ago, I'm not Jewish, but my father was very friendly with many, many Jewish people, was honored by Federation. I would go with him to Federation of Jewish Philanthropies and many other things. And we grew up respecting and loving Jewish people. You don't even think about it in Brooklyn and Queens mostly. And my father didn't go to Manhattan. He never went to Manhattan from the standpoint. He could never understand how in Brooklyn you could buy a piece of land for $3 a foot and how in Manhattan you had to pay
Okay, so in this, like he goes on to talk about New York City, but in this moment, he is calling out the fact, he's reminding everybody, and really I think he's speaking directly to the Netanyahu whatever, like the Kabbalists in Israel. And he's reminding them that they don't have the same power they had 15 years ago. He's saying that their apex of power is now waning and that their time is running short. Their ability to influence and control the U.S. government is over. Like, that's the way that I read that situation. And to further, some people are going to say that I'm stretching, but listen to this other thing he says in this moment, which again, people freaking out about this. But listen to what he says here.
Miriam Adelson, you want to come up here? Come up here, Miriam. Miriam gave my campaign indirectly and directly $250 million. She was number one. When somebody can give you $250 million, I think that we should give her the opportunity to say hello. And Miriam, make it quick, because $250 million is not what it used to be. Okay? Hello, darling. Incredible woman with a great husband, a man that loved Israel.
Loved Israel, didn't love America, loved Israel. And remember, he called. Wait, I'm going to finish playing this. I'm going to jump over her spot. I'm going to go back to Trump. But remember when he went to Israel and he called her out, and he said that I think she likes Israel more than America. Remember, he called her out. That was a call out. So wait, but listen to what he says here.
But it was so painful, so I said,
So
those of it, and he said,
Thank you.
maybe I will be the first time.
Listen to what he says here.
Yeah.
She said, think about it. I'll give you another $250 million.
I will give.
But her husband, Sheldon, was an amazing guy. And he'd come up to the office, and there was nobody more aggressive than Sheldon. I think I spent more time with him and you.
Okay, so and what he's saying, think about it, $250 million. He's talking about being president again, running for a third term, which is something Steve Bannon's been teasing for the past year, that there's going to be another term. And he's saying, oh, yeah, maybe I'll do it. Maybe I'll get another $250 million from you. He's like saying the quiet part out loud that this, I mean, she's obviously Israeli. You can listen to her speak, and she's Israeli. Like, she has that accent, right? She has the Eastern European accent. And, but she controls the president ostensibly. Like, he is feeding the Groypers here. He is fueling like all the memes about AIPAC controlling Congress by pointing out the fact that this woman has given him I think it's actually only $230 million, but he says it's $250 million. Her and her husband. And he said Sheldon was extremely aggressive. We now know from Colonel Douglas McGregor that Sheldon Adelson is the one who told Trump to appoint John Bolton. That before Sheldon Adelson walked into the White House, Trump hated Bolton. Trump was like, Bolton's a neocon. I want nothing to do with him. Nope. But then Sheldon Adelson walked in and said, I really want you to put John Bolton on the team. And Trump said, okay, let's put John Bolton on the team. And look at what's happened. He used John Bolton to make a point, and now John Bolton has been indicted on multiple felonies for classified material, etc. So, like, that is a really good example, I think, of one of these little subplots kind of coming full circle, which is Sheldon Adelson forcing John Bolton onto Trump using John Bolton, I think, to play the neocons, and then ultimately indicting John Bolton for being a crook. So I look at like what he was doing last night. I think everyone is very emotional about it, and they're very angry, and I understand why. I actually think that they're very justified in feeling that anger. It's basically, if you go on X right now and you search for these clips, the analysis is effectively that Israel controls the U.S. government, Israel controls the president, that we as a country are totally beholden to this foreign interest, which is the Israeli interest. And I think when Trump puts people like Mike Huckabee in as ambassador, Mike Huckabee openly says there's no such thing as Palestine. When he puts in people like that Yehuda Kaplan rabbi who is saying, let's censor everybody who criticizes Israel. Like, he's not ignoring the problem, and he's also not stopping the problem. He's putting the problem center stage, turning all the lights down, putting the spotlight on it, handing them a microphone, and then encouraging them to express themselves and to let everyone know who they are. That's the way that I view this entire situation. I view it as like that Russian analyst for RT wrote back in early November. He said Trump basically uses his personality to emphasize all the problems in American politics. He doesn't fix the American political problems. He brings them all to the surface by using his personality type to make it to quiet the music to the extent that you can see the underlying issues. They're very, very obvious without any question. They're obvious. And now you have like the biggest pundits with the biggest followings, like Tucker Carlson and others, talking about this stuff. And it doesn't mean they're all talking about it in the right way. It doesn't mean they're focusing on the correct facts and the correct issues, but the conversations are all happening, and it's now front and center in the zeitgeist. And it's an issue that has to be resolved one way or the other. We're either going to get Jewish defense leagues all over the country, where you're going to have armed militias walking around, intimidating people who criticize Israel, or we're going to address this problem and we're not going to let it happen. But you can see that once that process starts, once we begin to address the problem, you can see what the reaction is going to be from the Israeli side. They're going to throw everything and the kitchen sink at us to stop us from imposing their will on the world. And the last place I'll take it is this article, which is from Axios, and this is from Barak Ravid. And it's this one. Sorry, I thought I shared it. Scoop: White House scolded Netanyahu from Monday. White House scolded Netanyahu for violating Gaza's ceasefire strike. And I want to read the exact quote, so bear with me here. The exact quote is, first it says, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, White House envoy Steve Witkoff, and Trump's advisor and son-in-law Jared Kushner have become very frustrated with Netanyahu, according to two U.S. officials. Netanyahu is expected to meet Trump in Mar-a-Lago on December 29th, so we're looking at about 12 days from now. Driving the news on Saturday, Israel killed Raed Saad, the deputy commander of Hamas's military wing and one of the alleged architects of the October 7th attack. The attack in Gaza killed 4 people in total. U.S. officials said the Israeli government didn't notify or consult the U.S. ahead of the strike. That's a pattern that we've seen many, many times, including the strike on Qatar. Quote, the White House message to Netanyahu was, if you want to ruin your reputation and show that you don't abide by agreements, be our guest, but we won't allow you to ruin President Trump's reputation after he brokered the deal in Gaza, a senior U.S. official said. The next line, an Israeli official confirmed the White House was unhappy, but claimed the message was milder. So even Israel told Barak Ravid that, yeah, like we did get on the phone at the White House and they did scold us and they were angry about us killing this guy, violating the ceasefire and killing this guy. But, you know, it wasn't as bad as y'all are saying it is. So the message here is very simple. If you want to ruin your reputation and show the world that you don't abide by agreements, be our guest. That is exactly what Trump is doing right now. He's taking a problem that was probably going to play out over decades, if not generations, right? Slowly impose itself and put this tyranny. And somehow he has orchestrated the conditions that this has to happen now very, very quickly, because things are happening around the world that are baiting them into doing it, while also Trump, I think, is emboldening them by stroking their hubris, by stroking their ego, by, like you said before, with like the collectivist mind, like the collectivist thinking, not collectivism, but like the mob mentality. You know, people buy into the mob mentality when they see everybody else doing something. They suddenly think it's okay to pick up a rock and throw it through a window, right? Mm-hmm. All of these Israeli officials and pro-Israel Zionist simps, many of which I think are on the payroll of Israel.
Yes.
Like, you know, part of their Hasbara propaganda program, which is an official program. They just said they're upping their annual budget to $750 million. They are all, I think, feeling pretty good about coming up and saying the quiet part out loud, because they have Trump's backing. They're like, well, Trump's on our side and everybody loves Trump. So as long as Trump's on our side, we can step up and say, yeah, we're going to censor people who criticize Israel. Yeah, we're going to adjust the algorithm. Yeah, we're going to form Jewish defense leagues and, you know, have armed mobs roving the streets of New York City to, you know, intimidate people who don't like Israel. no, we're not going to do any of those things. Actually, you're allowed to think and do and say whatever you want. That is what the First Amendment says. But these people, including Yehuda Kaplan, the anti-Semitism czar, he doesn't like the First Amendment. He also says in another clip that I didn't play, he was like so disgusted because when he arrived in DC, he was walking into a building and some protesters were outside and they were screaming things at him like baby killer and, genocide and stuff like that. How are these people allowed to come out in public and say these things? Because he felt threatened because they called him a baby killer. It's like, bro, welcome to politics, bro. Like you can't handle somebody like a protester screaming at you, but you want to be the anti-Semitism czar in DC. So these people obviously are not equipped to like actually lead and be like political leaders. And yet Trump has put them front and center, stroked their ego, and given them every reason to basically say the quiet part out loud, which they're now doing. And it necessitates a response. At the same time, you have him basically saying, if you want to ruin your reputations by acting like a jackass, Netanyahu, go ahead. We're not following you, though. We've laid out the architecture for peace in the Middle East. We've done the Abraham Accords, which Netanyahu tried to back out of at the last minute. We killed Soleimani, which Netanyahu tried to back out at the last minute. And we've basically shown everyone that all of the Arabs are willing to make peace. Are you really going to be the turd in the punch bowl? If you want to be the turd in the punch bowl, show everybody you're the turd in the punch bowl. And that's what's happening now. And it's going to become undeniable, and we're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah. I find it all very ironic, somewhat sardonically funny in the sense that these groups are trying to accommodate and profile, the conservative right principally. But at the same time as they're doing that, criticizing the left, which is completely drunk on wokeism, this idea that my feelings determine reality and you should be banned, shut down, jailed if you offend my feelings or misgender me or, cause a microaggression. People can lose their jobs and do lose their jobs for microaggressions, telling a joke in the workplace that somebody found to be emotionally offensive, whereby all of a sudden secret tribunals come down on that person who told the joke in the cafeteria, and now they're out of a job, their career is destroyed because you did a microaggression. That's the thing that's contaminated the left. But the same techniques are being applied to the right. If you're all of a sudden using the wrong language that offends their feelings, except now it's not using gender profiles, they're using religious type of language.
It's identity politics. It's identity politics.
Yeah, for the right, for the left, it's woke rightism. So you have the same thing, and also then getting whole groups to identify with their class. Except again, it's not like you're identifying with an oppressed minority group like the left has been, whether it's all of the oppression of that's been imposed on females forever, or blacks or whatever, or gays forever, that you have to then identify and lose your individuality in favor of this mob victimization that comes with all sorts of toxic feelings and desires for revenge against the oppressive class. But the same sort of thing is applied to now, identify with the brutalization and all of the injustice that has befallen every Jew that's ever lived before you. And these kids who are put through these Zionist training programs, who then become the Likudnik radicals, the followers of Meir Kahane. Look at what they had to go through, or what they were put through, as far as being brought into Auschwitz, sitting in these, sitting in the ovens, being told as students, okay, go sit and go and envision the smell of your flesh burning in the oven. Go and envision the gas that's killing you, and they're put through like trauma bonding experiences again and again, losing each time their individual power of judging right and wrong, and struggle sessions effectively. Yeah, it's very similar, very, very similar. And then to the point that now all of a sudden they feel moral authorization or righteousness to wield the power of law to crush all of those culprits, even if it was done by, even if the crimes were done generations earlier. Whole groups now who are labeled as the villain now have to be punished and shut down, whether in the Middle East, whether they're Arab, whether they're Christian, whether they're Jewish, doesn't matter. Like, so it's a real major psychosis, and it's been around for a long time. And I appreciate your reframing and your ability to appreciate again some of the more often ignored nuances, especially in things like this. So I just wanted to get here on our show some of your considerations on record. I'm looking at the time, unfortunately, and it's 1:17. So maybe what we can do after you have some final thoughts, maybe we could look at some of the comments. I know there are a couple that I marked off that might be worth addressing quickly. I don't know if there's any thoughts you want to round out your composition with before we look at the audience's words.
Yes. And I appreciate all that. And so I want to address real quick, because there are a lot of people who are very upset right now, and they have been for a long time. First of all, I'll start by saying I don't know if I'm right. Like, I might be wrong. I'm fully prepared to be wrong and to accept the responsibility and the consequences of being wrong. And if I am wrong and Trump really is bought and paid for by these people, then we obviously, like, nothing really changes. Like, we still have to address the problem, right? It's just, we just don't have the guy in the arena that we thought we did. I think it's important to understand that. But really, like, to that point, a lot of people who supported Trump kind of had this idea that all they had to do was go cast a vote on election day, right? Support him, maybe like rhetorically, right? Like, support him in spirit. Like, we love Trump, put on the hat, put the banner in your front yard. Like, we support Trump, and that's it. Trump's going to come in and he's going to fix all your problems. He's going to save your world for you. He's going to deliver the golden age on a silver platter. And you can basically just sit on the couch and watch it all happen. That's not what's actually is going to happen. What's going to happen is that Trump has presented to you a reality that is very real now, which is this foreign government wants to impose itself on our society in a very negative way. It wants to rob us of our ability to have open discussion and dialogue and discourse, which is not a new threat, by the way. It just has now like it's kind of pulled the mask off and like revealed what its real intent is, and that's raw political power. Yeah. The question is, are we going as a zeitgeist, as a collective, as a country, as a culture, are we going to accept this? So the question is not, are we going to continue to support President Trump? The question is, are we, now that we understand what the problem is, because President Trump is so graciously, in my opinion, taken the slings and arrows, that were necessary to lay this all out. Because if you think that Trump could have come to and arrived at the place he is right now if he had been anti-Israel, then you have not been paying attention. If he was anti-Israel back in 2020 or anti-Israel back in 2016, would he have actually been allowed to win the election? Would he have been allowed to reach the pinnacle of success politically that he has? I don't think so. I think that there would have been mountains moved to prevent him from getting there. But once it became clear that he was going to be a very pro-Israel president, the diaspora supported him because they said, we can get something out of this guy. So that's the way I look at that part. But the second half of it is, what are we as a country going to do about it? And it's not about going after the Jews. It's about adopting a first principles mindset, including Jewish Americans, by the way, because as they said, they're going to come after Jews too, who criticize Israel. If you're a Jewish American who has no interest in Israel and you don't want a foreign government imposing themselves on you, guess what? You're right here in the foxhole next to us, and they're coming after you too. So we all have to adopt the mentality, this vigilant mentality of not accepting this behavior from any of these people. It doesn't matter if they're Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or whatever. If they want to impose that value system on us, they are the enemy, and we need to treat them like an enemy. And that adversary needs to be defeated. And that needs to happen politically, culturally, non-violently, because when you defeat them non-violently, that is a permanent victory that they can't come back from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I mean, and that's the whole idea of the nature of the United States as a republic, for the first time founded upon the principle, the belief, the faith that everybody has this power of reason within the heart, within the soul, which is not simply logic, but rather it's reason was understood. If you read the writings of people like Ben Franklin and so many of the greatest of the founding fathers, they had a philosophical understanding that reason was tied fundamentally to conscience and this power of the soul to discern good from evil, that moderates the unfolding of how we pursue truth, how we go into with having very different opinions, how we can have a civilized dispute and debate in a public setting around the idea, well, what is true that we're all pursuing? Two people with a common view can't both be right. They could both be wrong in varying ways, but there's still things that they could learn from in the course of iron sharpens iron, right? Like, you put your thoughts together and you come out with something which is more perfect, right? And as such, you can always have this idea, as the founding documents made the point, of a more perfect union at all times, that you could always improve it. There's no end to the possibility of perfectibility baked into the human condition and the laws that we create. We'll never have a perfect society, and if we did have such a perfect society that was so perfect it couldn't get any better, well, that would be a society that would actually be kind of terrible, because it would mean that we wouldn't have really any free will or ability. We'd pretty much be robots, idealized little robots with that couldn't have temptation, couldn't have vice. We would just be perfect angel beings. And at that point, we would be incapable. God himself would be incapable of improving. And that's a big limitation to put on God as well, that God has no capability of creatively improving upon a process of creation. So, I mean, that's quite a lot of hubris that human beings would impose on the creator of the universe per se. So, all that to say, I think that what you've just said is extremely important. The ability to discern right from wrong, to act accordingly, and to navigate with a creative strategy through that process is a fundamentally human thing. And the only thing that's allowed us to undermine the power of these mystery cults, these Gnostic satanic forces throughout the ages, which have expressed themselves in a variety and a myriad of ways, and always doing the exact same thing, which is to every single time these ancient, pagan cults, with all of their proclivities towards human sacrifice that we see across the Old Testament. If you look at the theme, if you look at the Old Testament from the standpoint of the awareness of the witch covens, these cultic orders, and these various perverse atrocities, these abominations that people have been duped into worshiping in lieu of a higher unifying moral God. That's the entire theme of the Old Testament, is our prophets emerging to battle Moloch and the followers and high priests of Moloch, of Baal, which are all over. There's like dozens and dozens of recountings of the battles against these things. And I mean, I think it's just so important to be able to take a reappreciation for that historic fight, because like somebody in the chat box, they said something like Charles Manson. Like, was Charles Manson also one of these, cultic communes? Yeah, that's another example of a Gnostic. Like, Charles Manson was directly an MK Ultra operative tied to Scientology. He had done 280 hours of auditing while he was under surveillance through a military intelligence operation in California. And his whole cult and his teaching was entirely based upon a Valentinian Marcion revivalist idea where murder becomes holy. It was tied to the Process Church of Final Judgment, a satanic church that was also founded by a couple of Scientologists in England that were seeded into New Orleans, into New York, into California around the 1960s, that he was also interfacing with directly. And these were, again, all Gnostic churches that saw the idea that when you're killing somebody, you're actually releasing their soul into some sort of a new dimension of light, whatever that is. So they have this reframing and brainwashing that makes the perverse and the good become unified in a common act. Doing evil becomes good, because in their minds, good needs evil. The only reason why good exists is because evil exists. So they've gone to the Manichaean realm, right? That supposes an equal balancing force of evil to good. But then they've gone even further by putting evil on even a higher platform as the thing that causes the good, right? And as soon as that logical backflip is permitted into the mind, all sorts of monsters can be built up, and perverse actions and identities can be built up. And the oligarchy has known this since ancient times, since the days before Christianity, before Judaism were even brought into this world. This is already a technique of mass global control. It didn't go away. It's the same thing. So yeah, just that was my little 2 cents there.
And the way, like from a mindset standpoint, the way to subvert what they're doing right now, because what they're doing right now is they're clamping down. That's the only thing. The only way tyrants know to deal with situations like this, as they can feel their grip on power slipping, is to clamp down and grip it harder. That's the only way they know how to deal with it. This is a historical truth. And by the way, that also tends to accelerate the loss of that power. It's a funny dynamic. The way to subvert what they're doing right now is to, instead of approaching this from attacking a specific entity, whether it's Israel or the Jews or whatever, the diaspora, establish a rally point. The rally point is first principles. The rally point is the First Amendment, right? The rally point is freedom and liberty. And the expectation is that every person should meet at that rally point. Anyone who doesn't come to that rally point is inherently not American. And if they're not American, then they don't matter to us from a political standpoint. Doesn't mean we want to kill them or we want to hurt them, but your opinion as it relates to American politics is totally irrelevant. So, Mr. Israel, if you want to tell us how to live our life, we will tell you kindly to go fuck yourself, and you can go back to Israel. And anyone who's a Zionist who wants to tell us how to live our life, you can go to Israel too and renounce your U.S. citizenship. Okay, so set the rally point, go to the rally point, as opposed to like running around trying to hunt monsters. I think that's where you're going to find yourself in trouble. And you're going to be fighting a million enemies at once and getting surrounded. Go to the rally point and fight back to back. I think that's the way that, from a mindset standpoint, from a metaphysical standpoint, that's how you win. With that said, let's hit some rants and some comments. I do want to. There was a good comment in here that I wanted to pull up real quick from Trump. I think True Deplorable. And it was, my biggest issue is we want accountability for the main players. This is, I think most people can resonate with this and identify with this comment. This is a comment that I think a lot of people are feeling. And despite all the apparent victories, there's still a lot of questions and a lack of accountability. And it's because we haven't seen accountability against main players. My question is, who are the main players? Because if you're talking about television characters, like, I would agree with you, seeing those people face justice and consequences is absolutely necessary. However, if we were to do that, like Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, like just rattle John Bolton, John McCain, all of them. But if those people are nothing but puppets, if they're just the shadows that are being cast on the wall, and you're not getting the guys casting the shadows, have you actually solved the problem? Or have you actually gotten the main players? Or are they just going to pick up new puppets and put the new puppets on the stage? And now you get whatever, Peter Thiel and like this next generation of influencers who are coming in, who are trying to tell us how MAGA is going to be from here on out, even though they weren't supporting Trump a few years ago. Like, this is what we have to be careful of. We have to keep our eye and focused on, like, what is the actual goal here? The goal is to save America and save our culture and restore it. And part of that's going to be justice, and part of that's going to be accountability. But we have to make sure we address the root cause, just like in Ukraine. If Putin doesn't address the root cause, then he's going to be fighting Ukraine in 10 years. He doesn't want that. So I think we have to approach it from that mindset, as opposed to just demanding that certain people get arrested. Okay.
There's also just quick. There's another thing here that I don't. Here, just quickly, this is an important one. Fabian society is one of the precursors to communism, and somebody else had written something like, "Are Fabians communists?" Plants Heel, and there. Okay, so I wrote 2 books on this. Extremely important. The Fabian society, they were nominally promoting and organizing themselves around a communist language, right? In 1883, when they were created. Now, part of what they were doing was they were working with another think tank called the Round Table Movement that operated out of Oxford. Fabians operated out of the London School of Economics. The way that they were, their logic or their strategy was to recognize that the abused poor, both within England but also around the world, around the colonies that had been so damaged and destroyed by the injustice of the British Empire, whether it was in China and India, you name it, the people were beginning to get empowered around the idea that they could do something to defend themselves against the evils and abuses of the empire. And so rather than fight against it, which was becoming more unmanageable, to just simply impose the will of an authoritarian British Empire onto India and onto the rest through mass genocides was only making it worse. In a similar way that the Roman Empire began to realize that by just killing more and more Christians under Nero, throwing more into the lion's den, it was only making it worse. More people were becoming empowered to join the Jesus movement back in the early Roman Empire days. So the British Empire was in a similar situation. People were still only more energized with the injustice and evil of the empire to organize around labor unions to defend the rights of labor against these British East India Company exploitative agencies, right? There was an idea now that of a very, very empowering, an empowerment to the people. So rather than try to destroy it, the Fabian Society was generated by a bunch of anti-human misanthropic elites who were all eugenicists. They were all eugenicists. They all hated humanity, but they realized that, okay, if you can't beat them, try to co-opt them. Use a language that makes it appear as though you care about the disenfranchised masses and labor and the poor. And so they found it very useful to start promoting. This is already, what is this, 1883? This is already 20 years after Marx's Das Kapital is even authored. So the Das Kapital is written 20 years after the 1848 Communist Manifestos, which is itself written like 8-9 years after Moses Hess's enshrinement of socialism and essentially what becomes Zionism. So you have, and fascism.
All the same thing, basically.
All this different flavors of the same beast, right?
Yeah.
So you've got this thing that the Fabians are then utilizing. They're like, okay, the language that we find within Marx, we can now use this to get people into our honeypot. And once they all are now being organized by the British Labour Party, which is the political party of the Fabians, when they begin to join into our new schools, like the London School of Economics, we got them. They might think now that they're fighting empire, but they're actually adopting doctrines which are going to make them instruments for controlled dialectics for the ensuing generations, and they won't even realize it. That they're, so we'll create, and this is why even leading Fabians, like Annie Besant, who was also a theosophist, the replacement of Blavatsky, one of her high priestesses, was also the founder of the India Congress Party, which was sort of like, what's his name? Otto Hume or something. Or no, it's not his, Alan Octavian Hume. That's it. A.O. Hume was a disciple of Blavatsky and Annie Besant and a Fabian who ends up founding the India Congress Party at the same time in the 1880s. And then Annie Besant becomes the head of the India Congress Party. Why? Because they're using an anti-imperial, pro-poverty language, which captures all of the revolutionary forces and then ends up creating this controlled pressure valve that then gives them local freedoms, but no real freedom. You're given like little, we'll release some of the tension in this little domain here and have you fight around you can fight around this local municipality, or let's say we'll give you a little bit more freedom and we'll create things like the Free Irish movement, which is actually just simply not in the Free Irish movement. What was it called? It was the responsible government movement in Ireland or in India. So they don't want real freedom anymore. The new movement is saying, okay, our banner is going to be asking the British Empire to give us more local influence under the control of the British Empire. They did the same thing in Canada. So it's all a trap. And all I have to say, so the Fabian Society is that it didn't create communism. It popularized it. But it also, if you look at Marxism per se, at least Marx's writings in his 3-volume Das Kapital, this is so important. And I don't think most people have picked up on this. There are elements within Marx's volume 1 of Das Kapital which have value for a specific disgusting reason. Because number one, his criticisms of the British East India Company and British capitalism, like free trade capitalism, which is simply a cover for oligarchical feudal collectivism under the guise of his critiques are okay. They're okay, negative like critiques. The reason why they work or why they're competent critiques which is why later on you'll find people who are calling themselves communists finding use and value in Marx's writings, despite Marx's actual intentions, is because Marx was actually stealing those critiques from Abraham Lincoln's core advisor, Henry C. Carey. And Henry C. Carey, because Marx was a writer for the New York Tribune in the 1850s and early 60s till he got fired. The key editor for the New York Tribune was Henry C. Carey, and Henry C. Carey's works on harmony of interests, on the principles of political economy, on I've got most of his writings in my office, and they're fantastic. And this was like directly educating Lincoln and Lincoln's strategies for the greenbacks and protective tariffs. Now, he was employing it, Marx, thinking that he could organize a younger Marx who was anti-slavery, pro-freedom. He thought he could organize him to be a useful instrument for this American system in Europe. Turns out he realized how wrong he was and fired Marx.
But communist being a thief, like, God.
Ironic. Well, there's no private property. There's no theft, right?
Yeah.
He ends up, like, Marx is studying Carey's writings and extracting the most potent elements from this American system that Carey is representing, and that Henry Clay and others had formerly represented, and then is repurposing it within the context of his toxic garbage that infuses Trojan horses, like the belief in a forever class struggle, which is not in Carey, but it is in Marx. The abandonment of private property, which is not in Carey, who balances the concept of private property and private interest and the general welfare as key in his system. But all of a sudden in the Marx system, that harmonization becomes impossible, and private property becomes the source, this equation of the source of all evil, which has to be eliminated, as well as religion, which is not in the Carey system. The Carey system is principally about a Christian economy. So, you have these Trojan horses, and that's an important thing to make, because the empire will always, if they can't beat it, if they can't destroy a creative innovation, which they prefer to do, steal it and then make it their own by extracting the essence and infusing and simply using the outward form with an evil essence that will then undermine the good. So the Fabians, what you'll find is that by the late 90s, while they began as a Marxist thing, they all of a sudden did a transition where, after co-opting enough of the pro-American system followers in Europe to their toxic garbage under the Marxist banner, right? After they had firm enough control, then they got rid of Marx, and then they infused it in an anti-Marxist grouping of socialist thinkers like Bakunin, who is a nominal enemy of Marx and a competitor for the First and Second International. And the Bakuninites, who were also the ones who were setting up Monte Verita in Switzerland. That was founded by Mikhail Bakunin, socialist commune guy. This is where the cults come in. So now they're reviving in a more virulent fashion, because Marx was still allowing for certain ideas that they don't want, because he stole them from Carey. Like, for example, the increase of the productive powers of labor, the importance of the sovereign nation state to direct credit towards the increase of the productive powers of labor, which Marx also emphasizes, but for worse reasons than were done more competently earlier by Carey, or Marx's refutation of Thomas Malthus. Marx actually has published refutations of Thomas Malthus. Good. It's good that you did that. The empire doesn't want
you stole it from somebody else,
and you made it a worse proof,
worse argument.
A worse argument, and a bad argument's worse. Like, a bad defense of the truth is actually more dangerous than an outright attack against the truth, because it creates the veneer, right? And so these Fabian Society leaders, they're all Malthusians, they're all eugenicists, they all want to reduce the productive powers of labor, and they all want to get rid of the nation state. So that's where you get this pro-anarcho-effective thing, anarcho-Bakuninite communalistic thing, while at the same time pushing what becomes the core of fascism and the National Socialists. So they then allow for a variety of nationalism, but now within the context of a National Socialist identity,
a socialist agenda. Yeah.
Which brings in Sir Oswald Mosley, who becomes both a theosophist as well as a Fabian. And Oswald Mosley is the head of the British Union of Fascists, pushing his own National Socialism for England. And it's his grandson today, Louis Mosley, who is the head of Palantir UK. So you got
really?
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is
Wow,
actually.
okay.
I got actually a picture of him right here.
We'll pull that up.
Louis Mosley, head of Palantir UK, and
Nice
that's
nice turtleneck.
yeah, and that's Sir Oswald Mosley, his grandfather, with his black shirts in the UK, who wants to be the British Hitler, and oh yeah, by the way, that's what's
Yeah. The new spy master for the MI6 is like the granddaughter of a Nazi, right?
Yeah, the granddaughter of a Ukrainian or actually a Russian defector who became a Ukrainian SS Waffen SS operative called the Butcher, who's now in charge of an agent. So she's now in charge of MI6, which has as its symbol the very same symbol of the all-seeing eye of Horus, which Aleister Crowley was pushing for his Age of Horus at the same time that Crowley was working with Sir Oswald Mosley through Mosley's second in command, JCR Fuller, who is the head of Crowley's Argentum Astrum Lodge. And this is a British general who taught tactics of tank warfare that are still taught in British military academies to this very day, JCR Fuller. And he was supposed to be Oswald Mosley's Minister of Defense under the condition that England would accept Hitler's offers for peace and collaboration as Hitler had tried. It was going to be this guy, Crowley's disciple, JCR Fuller, who were going to be the two top dogs working with the Nazis in co-managing this new world order globally, bringing in eugenics, all of these Fabian Society doctrines. And it was Crowley's Age of Horus, which again, this is the all-seeing eye of Horus that people have become quite familiar with, which was used as the foundation for MI6 when it was created right before World War I was unleashed. And that's the same symbol that was used for, John Poindexter's CIA operation called the Total Information Awareness in 2003 that was designed to justify a massive surveillance state dragnet. And when the American population said no, they don't want that, that was like rejected, John Poindexter and CIA's InQtel immediately repurposed, they basically selected the Silicon Valley transhumanist named Peter Thiel to recreate everything Poindexter was doing in his Eye of Horus total information awareness operation, because the idea of the Eye of Horus, kind of like Palantir, right? It's an all-seeing eye. The Palantir from the Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like you're being watched at all times. It's the panopticon. That's the idea that there's this godlike power, right? To just see everything that exists and read the book of the Akashic records or whatever, and just observe everybody at all times, so that if everybody feels like they're always being watched, they will self-censor. Self-censor,
yeah. That's what the panopticon is, by the way. Panopticon is the prison in which you're always being watched, or you at least think you're always being watched. It's possible for you always to be watched, but doesn't mean somebody's always watching you. But because of that, you're going to always be on your best behavior, because if you get caught screwing up, you get punished. Yeah. Yes. And so it's important to understand what is communism. If you break it down to its very root element, it is the deprivation of individual sovereignty. It is taking away someone's ability to operate as a sovereign power projection, basically. Look at Donald Trump. Why was Donald Trump actually able to run for president outside of the system, sidestep the system, and become president? Because he was a self-made sovereign individual. Not only was he a self-made billionaire, but he was a self-made, self-branded cultural icon, where he basically could just say something, and he was so popular and well known that thing would become the headline. That thing would become what all the news would talk about, right? He could manipulate narratives because of who he was. That's the ultimate form of power projection. They want to take that away from everybody. They want to take away your ability to organize capital on your own, your ability to make money. If individuals don't have any of those abilities to make money, to have a skill set, to project power, then the only currency in the environment is politics. The only currency is to grovel at the foot of the state and beg them for a small slice of the pie, which in the form of communism would be political power. That's what every other deviation of it, whether it's fascism, communism, socialism, Zionism, all of it demands the same thing: capitulation, surrendering yourself to the state, bowing to the golden calf, bowing to the centralized authority.
Or in this case, it would be like Horus, right? Because if you think, like, here, just to show it quickly, I said it, but I just want to show it. Like, that is the total information awareness. So they're just rebranding the MI6 Eye of Horus, which is, again, a prototype. Horus is a solar deity that becomes the foundation for Apollo, the fallen solar deity that's rebranded, who's also Lucifer. It's a solar deity, and that's what Crowley is calling for, is an age of Horus. So this is like exactly what John Poindexter, one of these core neocon Trotskyists, was setting up, who went to jail for his role in Iran-Contra and then got a gig under Cheney to just do it all over again. That's what they're like rebranding. And the fact that you have, again, the head of Palantir UK, who's Louis Mosley, who was in charge of setting up the first attempt at an age of Horus, this Thousand-Year Reich, back in the 1940s, is also, I see that as either a crazy coincidence or not so much of a coincidence. And they want us, like you said, to beg the gods, beg the high priests for a scrap or two. That's how they want us to think of our rights and freedoms, is as a begging thing, rather than our actual inalienable right as human beings made in the image of a living, loving, reasonable God, right? That they don't want that idea at all into the equation whatsoever. So, yeah, it's super important to stay sharp on this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it looks like we have a rant from 808 France, $1. Thank goodness we have Gordon to explain all this confusing situation. Well, I appreciate the rant. I don't know if I'm right. This is just my interpretation of it. It does track with like what my thinking has been up until now. Like, nothing that I'm seeing basically challenges in any meaningful way the like my thinking, to the point where I would like reverse course or go a different way. Certainly I'm always like updating my thinking though as I get more new information. It's like you're refining your ideas, you're refining your perspective, your discernment, like what you think you're seeing. And I think everyone needs to be doing that at all times. Like you said, like iron sharpens iron. So yeah, I think that's the only rant we got. And then I don't see any boosts. So I think we're good. But if you are listening to this on replay, you can go to badlandsmedia.tv/boosts and leave a rant at any time. And we will, you can also do a suggestion for a show topic, and we'll take that under advisement and try to do it. So yeah, but other than that, next week, I believe, next week is Christmas Eve. So I don't think we'll do a show next week. We might be able to pre-record one, but you and I will talk about that offline.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we'll see if we can pull something off. Yeah, like you said, pre-record maybe. I know people are generally. I used to be of the view that doing things on Christmas Eve or Christmas isn't really useful. But honestly, I've got so much feedback that there's always people who are hungry for even more substance, even amidst the time this time of year. So we should probably figure a way to do something as a pre-record.
We can try to pre-record something, but yeah, I mean, who wants to listen to you and I on Christmas Eve? It's like that.
I'd like to think a lot of people do.
Yeah, I mean, y'all have better things to do on Christmas Eve, right?
All right, cool.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks again, Matt. And yeah, we will maybe see you next week, but if not, the following week.
Absolutely.
Following week would be the day before New Year's. So I think we're good there too.
All right, we'll play it by ear. All right, guys.
We'll figure it all out.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.